So what was it like applying for the special use permit, receiving the special use permit, and do you think you would have been able to do it without your lawyer? And like, what advice do you have for people who are like, I have a beautiful piece of property, I own 6 acres, I have a nice house, like, do I need a special use permit? Like what is that? How do I go about it?
Especially when I got into the special use permit that I needed to get. That was the big ticket item that I needed to get. The building codes is kind of easy. That's simple. But the special use permit was, I'm actually in the middle of my second special use permit for another property that I'm building out.
Real quick, I have a video on special use permits that I'll link up on the top of the screen right now. But can you explain what a special use permit is?
Yes, that's where the county told me what you need to do is get a special use permit to use your rural residential property the way you want to use it. There's certain things that are allowed, like gardens and stuff like that. I don't need to get a permit to start a garden, or something like that. But a recreation camp is a special use. So it's that my 6.5 acres is, like I said, rural residential. It's a large acreage, but there's a whole bunch of 5-acre properties all around me. And the idea is that there's not a pig farm next door. You know, a pig farm is not allowed, but there's nothing that says glamping.
Yeah.
So the county determined what the square hole that you fit into is what's called a recreation camp. Okay. Things like a paintball course or something, maybe a go-kart course or a biking course or something like that. Those are uses of my property that's special. Okay. And they said glamping is a special use. And that was another angle I went to my neighbors on, saying, I could have a go-kart course. That could be a special use, but it's not. It's glamping. It's people enjoying their mornings and evenings. They typically leave my property. They don't stick around. They're tourists. Yeah. And they're out visiting Garden of the Gods or Pikes Peak or the hiking for the day, things like that. And they just I don't have. It's not a campground. I've had to correct people. It's not a campground. It's a glamp ground, and it's a much different. But to the counties, the county sees it as a recreation camp,
and that's how you were able to get the special use permit.
Yes, and that was awarded to me last July, and the county wasn't going to shut me down, and they didn't say. That's where the lawyer came in, very handy, because the lawyer had me walk that fine line of operating while at the same time trying to be compliant. So I'm not in compliance, but I'm able to operate my operation
and still make
still make money.
So what was it like applying for the special use permit, receiving the special use permit, and do you think you would have been able to do it without your lawyer? And like, what advice do you have for people who are like, I have a beautiful piece of property, I own 6 acres, I have a nice house, like, do I need a special use permit? Like what is that? How do I go about it?
Yeah, you probably need some sort of permit. Even in me out in the country in El Paso, unincorporated El Paso County, like I said, the name sounds like I could do whatever I want. You probably need to get something and do something. I'd say call the county and just figure that out. They typically will point you right in the right direction. Our county has a daily phone person. One of their planners sits on the phone all day long and takes those kinds of calls. Okay. I've called a few times. Hiring a lawyer was very strategic of me. Actually, I had a neighbor who was trying to do something else, but hers was different. She got denied by the county, but she just wanted to have a tiny house on her property.
Oh, wow.
And she had, it's the same grumpy neighbor, but she had to deal with this neighbor, and through the county, the neighbor didn't express concerns. They just called the county, and she was taken up, but she was applying for a variance, which is something different. And I think you had Nick. I think you referenced Nick. Nick was the guy, and I've talked with Nick too. Nick's great. So yeah, I would encourage your visitors to go ahead and listen to that episode, because
I'll put a link to that on the top.
Well.
He did.
Explained it very, very well. And that's his specialty. Actually, my lawyer is very much like Nick, except he's an old guy, but he's much older. But he was my lawyer was a former Board of County Commissioner. Okay. So having him in the room with my planning meeting. So I had a planning meeting just like my neighbor had a planning meeting. This is very interesting, actually. Didn't know we were going to go here, but my neighbor had a planning meeting, did not have a lawyer with them, and it was just them. They wanted to put a tiny house in their yard. I had a planning meeting, and I had this former Board of County Commissioner lawyer, very well known in the room. It just made all the planners and the people in this planning meeting, it was an online meeting, just kind of sit up straight. They were like, okay, I'm going to be corrected if I don't get this right. Yeah. The planner that was assigned to me in this meeting, again, that's public information too. People can actually watch this hour-long meeting with a bunch of, bureaucrats. Really, that's what we're dealing with. And my planner in the meeting, once he got his head around what I was doing, said, that sounds really cool. And they became kind of advocates for what I was doing. Now they would never say that. They would never say that they were advocates,
of course,
because they're wearing their government hat. They've got to push their code. But they wanted me to succeed. You could kind of, especially when I told them the story and really my beginning story of how I kind of fell into this, and I'm really trying to do what's right, and I want to honor you guys and get compliant, because I had health department, I had the floodplain guy, I had 2 health department people there. There were a lot of people who were saying you can't do what you're doing. But then the tone changed after a while. After the meeting, they really started to understand what glamping was. Yeah, I mean, the meeting started off. They're looking at me like I've got 3 heads. But the meeting ended going, okay, this is a checklist that you got to do, and here you go. This is the path to go. Yeah, and I think then I went down that path.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't want to reach out to lawyers just because they assume it's going to cost $75,000 just to even have a introductory conversation. And I think a lot of people also don't view starting glamping businesses as businesses. Like, let's not forget the 50% of the glamping business word is the second half is business. So I always tell people, if you can, try your hardest to, think about those things. Bringing in, I think you said a couple of things that really stood out to me. Showing me, that you not only knew what you were doing, but you were trying to set yourself up for success, which is after you accidentally started a glamping business and realized that you had something extremely profitable on your hands, and you doubled and tripled down on it, which is obviously a key sign of success that a lot of people should try to do themselves. You went and got a zoning and permitting expert, and then you also went and got a lawyer, and you figured out, how can I make this work? Especially once you hit the point that you didn't just have your hunting tent anymore. It seems like once you had your hunting tent, 2 other tents, and a couple of container homes, you said, okay, whoa, let me try to get it. It almost sounds like you tried to get ahead of this. Like, you knew like the hammer could be coming down at any moment. You're like, this is, I've got something too good to be contained here. And then you went about that steps, right?
Yeah.